A public crime emergency or a manufactured crisis? Sending in the National Guard to American cities is a hot partisan flashpoint. Democrats say it's just one example of presidential overreach. Republicans insist it's entirely appropriate. Is the separation of powers under threat? It's up for debate on CounterPoints with me, Melinda Nucifora. President Trump says too many US cities are dangerous and filthy. He's called it a national emergency and has sent in the National Guard, a move that has Democratic governors up in arms.
It's illegal, unconstitutional. Frankly, it's un-American to send troops into American cities when there's no emergency, there's no insurrection. And he's only doing it because he wants to disrupt future elections.
The National Guard has been patrolling Washington, D.C. for more than 2 weeks, and the mayor says there's been a sharp reduction in violent crime.
The difference between this period, this 20-day period of this federal surge, and last year represents a 87% reduction in carjackings in Washington, D.C.
So if it's working, why are the Democrats so concerned? They argue it's just one example in a long list of presidential abuses of power, like his intervention in the workings of the Federal Reserve and the Public Health Agency, the CDC. So, on this episode of CounterPoints, we'll ask, is deploying the National Guard good policing or a political ploy? Is President Trump abusing the separation of powers? And will he really push for a third term? On our panel to debate all the latest from the White House is John Burnett, the first vice chairman of the New York State Republican Party, and also on our panel, Kaivan Shroff, Democratic strategist and commentator. Gentlemen, thanks for your time here on CounterPoints. Well, the balance of power in the US between the states and the federal government is often a point of contention, and we're seeing that playing out on the streets of Washington, D.C. right now, where President Trump has gone over the head of the state governor, deploying more than 2,000 National Guards to crack down on crime. John, let's start with you to kick off our debate. Is this good policing or is it a political ploy?
Well, first, thank you for having me on your show. The District of Columbia, if it were a state, would be the #1 high crime, violent crime state in the country. So that's more than number one reason to actually move in, because the first obligation of the federal government, or the state government for that matter, is to keep people safe. So when you have high homicide rates, high violent crime rates, and you're not actually curtailing it to keep people safe, I think President Trump moved in to do the right thing. And when you look at the numbers, an AP NORC poll said that over 80% of the people polled said that crime is a major issue. And yet, just yesterday, the mayor of DC came out and thanked President Trump. She said she greatly appreciated the fact that more law enforcement was visible on the streets, and she went down through the numbers and saying that violent crime, starting with carjackings, plummeted, given the fact that more law enforcement were on the streets to deter crimes from actually happening and to get things under control. And she even praised, along with many other Democrats, praised the fact that, you know what, there were no homicides for a 2-week period since the troops came in. So it actually saved lives. I'm more concerned with, once the troops leave under Mayor Bowser, as well as the police chief, do they have enough and have the right strategy to make sure that they can keep people safe.
Kaivan, what's your response to that?
Well, I think a couple of things. Crime is a problem in DC, and I think that smart approaches to dealing with crime have led to DC having the lowest crime rates in 30 years. And I think we've been hearing these talking points about the crime rate in DC, but it seems like Republicans don't care about higher crime rates in red state-run cities like Jackson, Mississippi, like Birmingham, Alabama. So the talking point seems to fall a bit flat, and you had Kamala Harris, you had Hillary Clinton call out that Trump would do exactly this if reelected. He would send troops after Democratic cities. And he's doing it because it's an authoritarian flex. I think what's more concerning here is the pattern, right? Sending these troops into cities, building himself a $200 million White House ballroom. And is he going to leave the city of DC when his term ends, or is he going to refuse to, like he did last time? And is this all a test run to take control of our capital city? I think that's what a lot of Democrats are really concerned about. And then you see other behaviors, right? Like taking a 10% stake in Intel, demanding that Cracker Barrel, an American company, change its logo. These are full-on dictator moves and part of a much larger pattern and picture. So I know Republicans want to make this about crime and Democrats being soft on crime. My colleague just admitted Democrats are being reasonable on this. They're taking the help. We have to also acknowledge a lot of the resources to DC were cut by this administration. So some of what they're doing is just replacing those resources. You have National Guard members picking up trash and laying mulch that Park Services would have done, but Republicans slashed that budget. So I don't know that sending our troops to go pick up garbage is making the city safer.
Well, the thing is that you notice that he threw in a whole laundry list of things that have nothing to do with the question and nothing to do with what we're trying to talk about. It's a pattern I'm asking you to recognize. He's talking about all these different things. All these different things except for the crime rate. And that is one of the reasons why Democrats are saying, wait a second. I talked about the crime rate, don't lie. Their party is not addressing the number one issue. And in fact, members of Newsmax, right, where I have my show, one person was murdered a couple of weeks ago, and another person, a reporter, she was carjacked. Fortunately, her 1-year-old was not in the car at the time. So it's hitting everyday working people, whether you're whether you're a journalist, whether you're an everyday essential worker, or whether you work on Capitol Hill, everyone is concerned about the safety.
One thing Kaivan did raise that I think perhaps you should respond to, John, is this idea that this is the president focusing only on Democratic states and that there are red states that have troubling crime figures, but they don't seem to be in the spotlight. Why is that?
I think it should all be addressed, whether you talk about Memphis, Tennessee, or whether you talk about District of Columbia. It's easier, I should say, based upon the way the district laws allows President Trump to actually annex DC for not an extended period of time, a short period of time. So you can look at this as a base case or pilot program to possibly roll out to other cities, red or blue, because I'm not here to talk about Republican or Democrat run cities or states. I'm here to talk about what people need. They need a baseline of safety.
Kaivan, what do you say to that, this baseline of safety? If the mayor of DC is saying that crime has gone down, isn't that a good thing?
Crime was already at historic lows, and yes, she's taking the help, but I want to reiterate my point that agencies like ATF, Donald Trump has actually, for all the rhetoric, defunded police. He has cut $800 million in grants to support local law enforcement. He's gutted the ATF. We just had another mass shooting yesterday, unfortunately. All of these efforts have left DC without their usual resources. So some of this surge is replacing those missing resources, and they are thankful for that. But I will say, it's just just another talking point to say this is a test case. You have not heard Trump utter that he's going to do this in red states. You've heard Republicans on Newsmax and everywhere else only talk about DC, New York City, Los Angeles, and Illinois. So it's very hypocritical.
Let's talk about the numbers.
State, even though
let's talk about the numbers.
The top 10 murder states in the country are red states.
Since the troops were sent in to deter crime, robberies down 46%.
Still not going to talk about red states, right? That's what we're getting.
Carjackings down
Go
80%,
back to DC, yep.
and violent crimes down 22%. The results, well, you're saying,
nothing to say about red states.
It was actually trending down, so you're okay with a baseline number of carjackings, rapes,
Wrong.
and
I
murders.
said it's good. I said it's good.
We should be concerned about it all, whether it's blue or red or purple. It needs to be done because,
but you don't care.
Over 80% of Americans, whether you're right, left, or center, want to be safe and they want to live the American dream.
What about to Kaivan's point, though, John, that the president has defunded a lot of the police, so the National Guard is now having to come in to do the job that the police would have done if they hadn't have been defunded in the first place?
There is no... You know what's funny? Nancy Pelosi is in charge of the DC...
answer her question.
Capitol Police, right? Hold on. And they tried to say Trump didn't provide resources. It's the same narrative coming out of that when it comes to DC or law enforcement in general. I don't think there's any competent person who's watching this program would actually believe that President Trump cut law enforcement. No one with an ounce of common sense would believe that, but they're going to run
Anyone
with that,
with Google
just like
should
they
believe
ran
it.
with the Russian hoax and everything else.
Oh, now we're going to Russia. Talk about a dodge.
Escalator has been touting law and order, economic freedom, and prosperity in America. He's been consistent on that, and that's why he's smiling, because he knows that's the truth. All he's spitting is talking.
Sorry, I'm smiling because you managed to take us to Russia.
Okay, right of reply to you, Kaivan, then we're going to move on. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, I mean, talk about a dodge. Why are we talking about Russia? You asked him about Trump defunding police, which
because you're dodging the
that
question.
Donald Trump did make those cuts. Anyone can Google it. I know the truth hurts, but just
people
Google
in DC are dodging bullets and you're dodging questions.
All right, well, let's move on
Good
to
line.
another big question mark that some people have over the president. I'm going to put this one to both of you. President Trump prides himself on not doing things by the book. He's lauded by his supporters for standing up to the political establishment and, in his words, fixing all the ingrained problems. But in doing so, he's drawn criticism for overreaching. The separation of powers is in the US is enshrined in the Constitution, but his detractors argue he's putting that doctrine at risk. Take a listen, though, first of all, to this response from the president.
And they say, we don't need him, freedom, freedom. He's a dictator, he's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, they're saying you're trying to take over the republic. These people are sick.
Kaivan, is the president acting like a dictator?
First of all, just that statement that he doesn't like a dictator. There isn't a dictator Donald Trump has met that he hasn't fawned over, loved. He was writing love letters to Kim Jong-un. He rolled out the red carpet for Putin. So we all know that's dishonest. And I think, yes, back to my point, he is acting like a dictator, trying to totally take over every branch of government, even going so far as to nominate Emil Bove, who said that he would ignore judicial rulings, what our courts say, to the federal bench. So it's a full MAGA takeover of government, and it's horrible for the enduring nature of our democracy.
John?
You know, it's very interesting to hear Democrats justify high crime rates and saying, no, don't try anything different. Don't do anything about the problem. Let's just wish it away. Or instead of bringing in law enforcement, let's just double down on social workers. Well, the American people have more common sense than that. And when you actually go and talk to everyday people, including business owners, they praise the move. Why? Because people can
Not
actually
true.
start walking down the street with their children, jogging, and actually stop at a red light or a stop sign without the fear of being carjacked and their life placed in danger. So, you know what? If the local politicians who are using taxpayer dollars to do nothing to address the situation, that's why many people, politicians as well as everyday people, are saying, you know what? We welcome President Trump, whether it's a blue or red state.
What about, John, the accusations from some of Trump's critics that he's weaponizing institutions like the Federal Reserve, like the CDC, that his moves to intervene in those institutions is unconstitutional and an overreach?
You mean when too late Jerome Powell actually cut interest rates before the election last year, but only lowered it once since then? Who said, interest rates or current inflationary environment is transitory? You know what? When you look at law, even when you look at the medical field, there are multiple opinions. And President Trump has a different opinion than the Fed. In fact, that's good for our republic. And when you look at, independence, whether you look at how the previous administration was run and operated, as well as the Fed, they're not doing the right thing. Look, inflation was as high, almost double digits in America. And when you look at the credit card interest rates, they still haven't come down to give people a reprieve who use credit cards just to close their monthly budgets when high inflation was running rampant. Then when you look at the current situation, existing home sales are drastically down. Why? Mm-hmm. Because mortgage rates are still high, while Lisa Cook, a Fed board governor, actually got a special interest rate. So people are sick and tired of the elite class getting a break while the burden, whether you talk about high interest rates or high national debt, are on the backs of everyday working Americans. President Trump is saying no mas, no more. We need to do differently.
Let's talk about that, because Donald Trump just added $4 trillion to the national debt that my generation, not your generation, is going to have to own. Donald Trump is actually currently responsible over his 2 terms for 25% the total American national debt. He has been writing checks. He's the bankruptcy king and he's bankrupting the country. Why is he putting so much pressure on the Fed? Well, because his economic decisions have been horrible. His tariffs are wrecking our economy. Consumer spending down, business investment down. And so he wants the labor market so bad, he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because he didn't like the numbers. And now he wants the Fed to bail him out for a short-term win
honestly,
that's going to cost us in the long term. It's very much like what he's actually doing, I think a similar, but somewhat similar redistricting fight, right? A short-term win. He wants to make our districts that much more partisan when they should be nonpartisan for the benefit of democracy. But because he's done such a bad job, he needs to rig the 2026 midterms, and it's going to do lasting damage to our democracy. You see this pattern over and over again in everything Donald Trump does.
You know what? Your hair is perfect, nice, crisp shirt, but
Thanks.
Your facts are all wrong.
At least I have some.
Yesterday, obviously you don't read the news or actually watch programs, but I'm glad you're on this one. Let me just
I don't
read
watch
to you
Newsmax, that's for sure. I can tell you I don't watch Newsmax.
The
Arabiya
the U.S. economy expanded 3.3% in the second quarter. That beat estimates. So tariffs obviously
Not true.
have not impacted the economy based upon what just was released today. And guess what? Consumer spending is also up, beating estimates. So the Democrats are holding on to this fear-mongering and false narratives that tariffs are bringing down the economy, when yet consumer spending is up, business spending is up, as well as GDP is up. So there's no need to have these high interest rates and no need to stoke fear coming out of the DNC as we go into the midterm elections. I know you're scared. I know you're running scared.
Your party is the one that wants to rig the midterm. So if you were so confident, why does Trump need to beg for 5 seats in Texas?
Thank you for everything that you're doing.
Explain that.
Because you're helping Republicans win. We really appreciate the help.
Just explain it. If you're so confident, why rig the outcome?
The economy's great.
No.
And if the
then why steal 5 seats in Texas?
What it should do, instead of its board of governors seeking special interest rates, maybe we can actually empower the people.
It is a good question, though, John, and I want to reiterate what Kaivan has said there. If the economy is so good, why is the president so preoccupied with the Federal Reserve and interest rates? If things are going great, well, shouldn't he just keep his hands off and keep doing his job and let the Fed do theirs?
You know what, Melinda? You have a great show. You're doing well. My counterpart, he's doing well. I'm doing well. But the majority of people that struggle day to day, they were crushed under Bidenomics and Kamala Harris. Being told that inflation is transitory when they suffered for years with high interest rates. So just to balance things out, and not only were they paying more for everything for an extended period of time, the mortgage rates haven't even come down. So that way they could try to move from paying high rent to actually paying a mortgage, giving themselves an opportunity in the future to create wealth or at least pass it down. So I'm talking about balancing here, not for the people who are doing well like us or President Trump himself, but for the everyday average person that's still paying 20 plus, upwards to 25% in interest payments on credit cards, paying over 7% for a mortgage, and in some respects, 8 and 9% for a car loan. That is ultimately an issue for everyday working people who don't have the wherewithal. So we have to find balance.
Let's talk about everyday working people.
And I'm not saying
let's talk about them.
All right, your response, Kaivan?
Yeah, everyday working people, the bottom 60% of Americans lost out their after-tax income under Donald Trump's one big beautiful bill, which, by the way, he doesn't even want to call it anymore, cuts those incomes for the bottom 60%. You know who it benefits? The top 0.1%. Donald Trump's rich friends earning over $3 million a year. And my colleague still did not answer the question, which is that if everything's so wonderful on the economy, on crime, on every issue under the sun,
people are still hurting with high interest rates.
Why does Trump need to steal 5 seats in Texas if he's going to win midterms because he's so popular? It's because he's projected for a blue wave blowout. He is deeply unpopular on these issues. Explain it.
You mean like the one you were predicting last year? Okay.
Why steal the seats?
We're going to get close to running out of time, so I want to move us on to our last segment because this is an interesting one, and I'm looking forward to getting your take on them. One of President Trump's most vocal critics is Californian Governor Gavin Newsom. He's been attracting a lot of attention lately for his social media trolling of the president. Kaivan, is this a case of if you can't beat them, join them? I mean, Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. Is that notion now just out of the window for Democrats?
That's been out. That's been out for a decade, unfortunately. But I think the reality is what Gavin Newsom is doing is effective in two senses, though I will concede I think it's got a short runway with Democrats because Democrats aren't in this to score random Twitter points against Republicans. They want to pass policies that help the American people. That's the end goal. But what Gavin Newsom is doing in two ways is nice. For Democrats, it's cathartic because they feel like Donald Trump is this unchecked bully that regardless of the legal system, regardless of so many things, just cannot be held accountable, it seems. So it's nice to see somebody stand up to him. And I think second, it really sort of outlines how outrageous and preposterous Donald Trump's behavior day to day is that has been normalized. Because when you see a sane person like Gavin Newsom putting out those tweets in all caps, you're like, yeah, it is weird that a politician does this. And obviously that's part of his point. When he's talking about, make America Gavin again as a joke about Donald Trump's narcissism, it really hits that point home. So I think it's an effective gimmick in that sense.
Why is it getting under
That's why
Republican skins, John?
Look, honestly, you know what? He's good for fundraising, right? Parties fundraise off each other, but let's look at, again, let's bring it back to the people. When you look at the inflows of population versus outflows, there are more people fleeing California in New York. Why? Because of the high taxes and mismanagement. These are facts. And Gavin Newsom,
more people have said Florida to California.
Even the mismanagement of the wildfires, right? There was no water to put out and effectively address the wildfires. When you look at the crime, when you look at the California has the highest level of homelessness. If their policies worked, people would not be fleeing the state of California.
More people flee Florida to California.
Why? Because people have been leaving there, going to Texas. Hence the reason why Texas wants to redraw the maps based upon the huge influx of population. Remember, Texas,
John,
is a great place to do business, and no state income tax for the average worker. So it's working. Going back to Trump's tax bill, look, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security.
All right, we're almost out of time, so let me get Kaivan's response to that. Kaivan?
Here's an inconvenient fact. More Americans have left Florida, a red state, for California, a blue state run by Gavin Newsom, than have left California to go to Florida. Similar climate, all of that. Similar offerings, and you can't explain that dynamic. It's true. Google. People that pay attention to facts believe it. I know in your world, whatever you think is what goes, there's actual data and facts that everybody else in the world and in the business community pays attention to and uses to make decisions.
Okay, I've got a question. Before we're out of time, I want to put it to both of you. Another reason why Gavin Newsom is making headlines at the moment, on Wednesday, he made a stark warning that he says President Trump is serious about running again in 2028, and he says we're losing the country in real time. John, will President Trump really push for a third term?
That is foolishness. President Trump already came out and said that he's not running again, but because these foolish Democrats rather focus on the latest foolish headline instead of focusing on coming with real policies, all they have is fear mongering. So you know what? President Trump is going to troll them. Because all he has to do is put out something on Truth Social or X, and just like minions, they'll actually run and start pushing these narratives instead of really start focusing on real policies like crime, to address crime, the local economics and things of that nature. It's foolishness.
All right, Kaivan, to that point, is it easier for Democrats to scaremonger that President Trump is going to run for a third term than putting in the work to make sure that they are a viable alternative?
I just think anybody in media using the idea that Democrats have scaremongered, everything they warned about has happened. Every single thing Democrats have been warning about for the last decade, Donald Trump and Republicans have done. Donald Trump even
won the
incited
election.
an insurrection. And by the way, Don's saying now that he won't run for a third term, but I guarantee you, the minute Donald Trump says he'll run for a third term, he'll be the first guy behind him in the cult saying, yeah, screw our democracy, it doesn't matter. So absolutely ridiculous talking points. And I don't think Democrats have been scaremongering at all. I will concede to the premise of your question, which is I think they have to make that case, but they also have to offer a positive set of policy proposals and communicate that effectively, particularly on affordability to the American people.
Yeah.
And Melinda, really quickly, that's why President Trump ran away with this election last year and won the popular
He didn't run
vote.
away with it.
And you can't do that unless a high number of Democrats cross over and vote for him. Why? Because they were sick of open borders, a poor, high inflationary economy, and not feeling safe. That's why Democrats failed. Trump is not running again, but guess what? J.D. Vance, other people, as well as local Republicans are running in blue states, and they'll likely win. That's why he's smiling.
All right, round us out, Kaivan. What do the Democrats need to learn? I mean, John's made some pretty good points about their failings from 2024.
He hasn't made great points, and none of the points made are based on true facts. So Donald Trump's already hemorrhaging support with Latinos, with young voters, some of the groups he made gains with, double-digit losses with young voters just 8 months into his second term. But secondly, MAGA as a concept is fractured on so many issues, on immigration. You even have Joe Rogan still coming after Trump for his Epstein cover-up, on international wars that Donald Trump is heating up, those foreign conflicts. He's lost Tucker Carlson and folks. So there's so many issues, adding $4 trillion to the debt, that the MAGA base has crumbled a lot since his reelection. And J.D. Vance is absolutely not the front runner in that race. There are so many players that are going to be tearing each other apart. And it's going to be actually very tough, I think, for Republicans to keep their thin coalition together.
But tell me, though, what
Trump is
what are
addressing real
Democrats
issues
doing
while you're
differently? What have they needed to
on
learn from their
What are
failures?
Democrats doing differently? Yeah, sure. Democrats are focusing, by the way, as Kamala Harris did, on affordability, on making life better, education opportunities, childcare, access to jobs. By the way, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris created more jobs than the last 3 Republican presidents combined. Donald Trump, in contrast, had to fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because his jobs numbers are so bad. So I think Democrats need to figure out how to communicate what they have been doing to the American people and then build on that. And I think people like Ro Khanna do a good job of that, talking about, for example, who are going to be the winners and losers on an issue like AI, right? The next digital wave. Is it going to be rich folks and sort of those Silicon Valley bros that have all lined up behind Donald Trump while the truckers across America get replaced and shut out? Democrats want to give people an opportunity to own a part of that, to be a part of that. So I think that's the vision and the picture they're painting.
Okay, just finally, and by right of reply, John, what vision are the Republicans going to be selling for 2028?
They're going to be selling massive investment, not only by American businesses in America, but also international businesses. Whether you talk about investors from the Middle East, Asia, Europe, Latin America, a lot of companies and individuals are investing in America. When you have large investments like that, in addition to tax breaks, not only on large businesses, but small businesses, as well as working class individuals, that creates a huge and robust economy, which makes for not only higher wages, because wages are going up, but also mobility, job creation for those who aren't working and for those who want to move into better opportunities. All of these things are working. And he's telling Kamala Harris, well, Kamala Harris ended her campaign not only in failure, but $20 million in debt that the DNC just voted on this past week to pay off her debt. So they're still suffering from last year's election while President Trump is moving this economy forward, moving this country forward. And he's not just doing it for America, he's doing it for other nations around the world, creating a fair and balanced
Business investment is down.
Gentlemen, I wish we could continue our debate, but I know we are out of time, so I'm going to have to leave it there. But what we love on CounterPoints is two strong sides to every story, and we certainly got that with the both of you this evening.
Well,
Thank you so
one.
much to John Burnett, the first Vice Chairman of the New York State Republican Party, and Kaivan Shroff, Democratic strategist and commentator. Thanks for joining us on CounterPoints, gentlemen. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of CounterPoints. Be sure to keep up to date with our latest debates and interviews by subscribing to Al Arabiya English on YouTube. And be sure to follow us on X and TikTok. We'll see you next time.